I'm going to talk about mental health today because mental health issues are definitely on the rise, and COVID has just exacerbated this issue. I've just learned 37 million Americans are on SSRI drugs. And my daughter, who is going into her junior year in college, just told me that it is super common for women her age to be on antidepressants. So she's seeing that in a lot of people she's meeting at college. 23% of women take SSRI drugs. And I'm talking about this today because I've just lost somebody that I've known for over a decade to suicide. And she had a very difficult time after weaning off of an SSRI. It made her brain super sensitive and what she felt inflamed. And then she became sensitive to other things that she was taking and anything else that she tried to take in order to help calm her brain down. And finally, after about a year, she was unable to bear it anymore and she took her life. So this is just a really tragic issue. And, you know, I just feel like there's an over-prescribing of these medications. And occasionally they have their place. Occasionally they are what's required to help somebody. And I think that they have their place, particularly when this is a final resort and everything else that could be contributing to depression has been looked at and addressed. And I think so often that's just not the case. So often it's the first thing that's offered to somebody. And so I wanted to talk today about other things that I see that really contribute to mental health issues. And I'll first start on the physical level, because that's, you know, mostly what I do as a medical doctor. So what are these other areas that contribute to mood? So first, let's talk about mood. You know, when someone's depressed, it's not just one thing, because there's different kinds of depression that are influenced by different neurotransmitter imbalances in the brain. Simplistically, you can take the neurotransmitters in the brain and almost divide them into two categories. The excitatory ones, which would include dopamine and norepinephrine and epinephrine, and calming, which would be serotonin and GABA. So very oftentimes people have a deficiency in the calming neurotransmitter serotonin. And this type of depression tends to have almost an agitated aspect to it. People can be prone to not only depression, but also a little bit of anxiety. They can have a bleaker outlook, almost feel like their head is just like kind of underground a little bit and they can't see the light. They can have negative self-talk, kind of lower self-esteem, and perfectionism and negative thoughts about themselves. On the flip side of that, when someone's suffering from depression related to a deficiency in dopamine or norepinephrine, they tend to have the type of depression where they just want to lay in bed and cover up with a blanket. And they have a very low energy depression. They've lost their zest for life and their passion. And then sometimes people can have a little bit of both. So I always say that neurotransmitter levels and balance rests on a balance of hormones in the body. There are some hormones that actually have activity in the brain and act almost like an antidepressant. Estrogen in the female, for example, is essential for mood. And when estrogen levels fall, some women are very much prone to low serotonin depression. Same is true for men with testosterone. So testosterone is essential for mood in the male, and men can also have depression if testosterone levels fall. And then it's not just the sex steroids that influence mood, but the thyroid is critical. So when someone has a deficiency in the active thyroid hormone T3, they can't synthesize serotonin properly in the brain. So T3 is required to synthesize serotonin. So it can lead to a serotonin deficiency if either A, you can't convert your inactive thyroid into the active thyroid hormone, so you have an active thyroid hormone deficiency, or an overall thyroid deficiency. The thyroid is a stimulating compound, and it also has some stimulating effects on the production of the excitatory neurotransmitters dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. So a low thyroid can lead to a mixed neurotransmitter depression. So it's very critical to take a look at that. And the adrenal hormones are essential. So the cortisol has become a maligned hormone in medicine and in popular thinking. People think, oh, it's the stress hormone, so too much cortisol is bad, so cortisol is bad. Well, it's the only hormone you can't live without, actually. It's essential. And it's just as bad to have too much of it as to have too little. And so if you don't have enough cortisol, cortisol is essential for the brain's utilization of glucose. And if you don't have enough, you don't have the fuel in the brain to produce the neurotransmitters. So you can end up with neurotransmitter deficiencies because of low cortisol. Also, cortisol is the fuel, or like the primary fuel you should be running on in the day. And if you run out of cortisol because your adrenals are fatigued or depleted, and not run out, but if you kind of outstrip your ability to make cortisol to meet the demands of your day, you're going to flip into an adrenaline mode. And so then people can begin to feel anxious. So low cortisol can be incredibly detrimental to neurotransmitter levels in the brain and the feeling of anxiety in the body. The other adrenal steroid hormones like DHEA and pregnenolone have beneficial effects on mood as well. So deficiencies of those can be problematic. So hormones are essential, and we really need to be looking at those. Now, one thing that is so important is looking at, because first of all, women are more prone to depression, and they are taking far more antidepressants than men. They're prescribed more antidepressants. And one of the issues that I think can be contributing to this is birth control. So we've probably heard that women can have depression as a side effect to a birth control pill. That is true. The synthetic progestin in birth control pills can cause mood disorders in some women. But there are some untalked about issues that can happen as well. Sometimes women are prescribed a birth control pill that has too low of a synthetic estrogen in there, and they can have depression because of that. And then worse, sometimes women are given the shot that has the progestin but no estrogen. So Depo-Provera is one of those, but there's a birth control shot that's just progestin. It shuts down ovarian production of hormones, and it doesn't deliver any synthetic estrogen. So all of a sudden, the young woman is placed in almost like a menopausal state. So she can have depression, anxiety, sleep disruption, even hair loss, vaginal dryness, low libido, things like that. And these things can creep in gradually, and she doesn't even know. The other thing that I've seen that isn't talked about very much is the issues with IUDs. In the world of IUDs, you have the copper IUD, which has its own issues because it can lead to heavy bleeding and some cramping and possibly some copper leaching. But for some women, it works really well. And for others, it can have those side effects. So the alternative to that, and the only alternative that was available for a really long time, was the Mirena IUD. And the Mirena IUD was impregnated with progestin. And that's preventing the uterine lining from building up so that the periods wouldn't be as heavy as was seen with the copper IUD. So that was a good thing in a way. But the level of progestin in the Mirena was enough in some women to communicate up to the pituitary and shut down the pituitary stimulation of ovarian function. And so it was almost like the woman was on a birth control pill that, again, didn't have any estrogen. So I started seeing women coming in with hair loss, depression, vaginal dryness, low libido, sleep disruption, things like that. And they didn't put 2 and 2 together because they weren't told that this was a possible risk. And so I think the word caught on, like enough women were experiencing this over the years. And like, let's be straight, most women didn't experience this, but I would see the ones that would. So enough people probably heard that this was happening. And then people developed 3 new IUDs that have lower progestins in them than the Mirena. So these are better because they're much less likely to suppress ovarian production, but I've still seen it. So even with the lowest one, they vary in progestin levels. Even with the lowest one, I've seen this in a woman where I've tested her blood a few times, and each time menopausal level of estrogens and a whole host of symptoms. So I just want everyone to be aware of that. And if you're depressed and you've had an IUD placed, put 2 and 2 together and at least bring that up to your doctor and ask to have your blood levels checked of estradiol. Okay, so hormone balance, that's one huge issue that can underlie mood disorders. The other is nutritional status. Sometimes people are not getting enough nutrients in their diet, or they're not eating the right diet for them, or they're eating kind of like a specialized or a fad type diet that's creating some issues. So for example, you need the right amount of protein in your diet in order to supply the raw materials for your brain to synthesize neurotransmitters. So basically, amino acids are derived from protein, and amino acids are the building blocks from which the brain makes neurotransmitters. So from tryptophan, the brain makes serotonin. From tyrosine, the brain makes norepinephrine and dopamine, and these are found in protein in your food. So we absolutely need, if you're depressed, sometimes if you just start eating a little bit more protein, it can be really helpful. The other thing that's interesting is that you also need carbohydrate to synthesize particularly serotonin. And so what I'm seeing is that sometimes when people are doing intermittent fasting, or they're now moving into like a ketogenic diet, which I think are great diets or have some good attributes, sometimes it's leading to depression in somebody. So they're not getting quite enough carbohydrate in order to kind of boost up the production of serotonin. And all they need to do is add like a sweet potato to their day or something like that. And all of a sudden they feel so much better. So these are things to think about. We also need B vitamins in our coming in through our food, because these are required cofactors for the production of neurotransmitters. And yes, we get B vitamins in our diet, but you may even consider a B vitamin supplement. And sometimes that's what the person needs to kind of help boost the neurotransmitter production. So the third area that I think you need to think about if you have a mood disorder is your gut health, because the microbiome actually influences our mood in ways beyond we can imagine. For example, if you happen to be eating a diet that is loaded with sugar and carbohydrates, you may have induced an overgrowth of yeast in your gut. And then the yeast produces toxins and byproducts and things that can get absorbed into your bloodstream and actually affect the mood. Certain other types of bacteria can do the same. So your microbiome and even the status of your gut in general can have profound effects on your mood. So suffice it to say, there are physical issues that can lead to a mood disorder that definitely need to be looked at and sorted out before you just hop right onto a medication. Now, of course, another area is lifestyle. that, I think that we can make some adjustments to our lifestyle that can have incredibly beneficial effects with our mood. So we need to look at, how are we sleeping? How much exercise are we doing? Do we have any mindfulness practice in our life? Are we meditating? Are we spending too much time on screens? Are we using screens close to bedtime? What's the content of the media we're saturating ourselves in? Is it positive? Is it negative? Are we reading things that are uplifting, or not? So this area of lifestyle cannot be overemphasized. It's critical. So what I find in my depressed patients is if they incorporate even 20-minute walk every day, it can brighten their mood significantly. And then the final area to talk about today that is so fundamental to our mood is really more on a psycho-spiritual level. It's looking at, what is inside of us? What have we stored? What emotions were we unable to deal with and metabolize that we have now kind of stuffed in our bodies from previous traumas or from being slighted by, like someone important to us? What have we learned from our familial and societal programming that's affected how we feel about ourselves? These things, this whole area is really the stuff of life. And this is the gold mine for unearthing the underlying determinants of mood. And as a culture and in medicine, we need to emphasize this aspect of life. And it's hard to do in a quick appointment, but we need to be providing referrals to good psychologists, good energy workers, meditation classes. I often refer to the Academy of Intuition Medicine, which is this incredible school where people can learn to meditate and do some good inner exploration, and provides a lot of support. Maybe we can give someone a good book, So all of these things are just so critical and fundamental to our mood and need to be looked at before we just hop on an antidepressant. And then, if we need an antidepressant, just remember, low dose, short period, maybe it's essential. But ideally, it's not forever, because the longer you're on it, the harder it can be to get off.